Okay, everyone. So before we begin, I'm just going to go over some of my procedures, and then I'll finish up this this chart once we get talking, so I don't waste any of you guys' debating time. Very basic things. First, I'm going to hold up 3 color-coded placards. One at 2 minutes has the green rim around it. One at 2:30 has the yellow rim about it. And one at 2:55 with the red rim about it. And then at 3 minutes, I'm going to count down with my fingers till 10. And I will verbally cut you off at that 3:10 mark, but there's always room for like 1 or 2 seconds if there was some lag, or this internet or type of debating always ends in some weird things, so don't worry about that. It won't be too abrupt. For questioning, it is direct questioning. At 20 seconds, I will hold up this time placard to let you know that you have 10 seconds remaining in your block. I just ask that in questioning, you try your hardest not to talk over people, because it's sometimes hard to hear on this online format. I know it's a strategy in person sometimes, but here it doesn't really work. So try to keep that to a minimum. And then also when I call on next speaker, stop talking, or next questioner, stop talking, so we can get that questioning block going as quickly as possible. For the judges, I'm going to be having the times of every speech on that chart that I'm going to send in the chat, so that if you don't write it down by any chance, it'll always be there for you to go back and check. Additionally, I just ask that you put your placards up to your screens like this, so that I can clearly see that you are wanting to be called upon, because sometimes when it's like this, it's kind of hard to see. So I just ask that you do that so that our chamber can be as efficient as possible. Other than that, do we have any questions while I put this in the chat? Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and share this with you guys. Okay, it's not fully updated yet, so don't worry if something's out of whack. Okay. Let me know if you guys can see that all right. Okay, cool. So with that, I'm going to ask if there's any motions on the floor. Representative Mazumdar.
I move to table the debate regarding single-family zoning and proceed with the meat and subsidies legislation.
Second.
Seconds. Okay, seeing a second, do we have any objections? Okay, seeing none, I'll unilaterally move to table that piece of legislation and open debate on meat subsidies. Do we have an author on the floor? Do we have a sponsor on the floor? That'll go to Representative Smith on the preset precedents.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. That is Representative Smith speaking for the first time today from Central Minnesota. PO Parley judges already? Perfect. All right, and then Judge Reed, always assuming that you're ready. For those of you who, sorry, Mr. Reed, all good?
Yeah, sorry, I was just confirming.
All right, sounds good. All right, PO ready? Good, awesome. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Midwestern Thanksgiving, a turducken is a dish consisting of a deboned chicken stuffed inside a deboned duck, further stuffed into a deboned turkey. The guidelines set up by the USDA encourage only 2 to 3 servings of protein or dairy per day. And when we pass, our constituents are incentivized to meet these standards. Pass first for health, second for environment, and third because of our changing climate. So first, let's talk about health. Americans eat more meat per person than any other people on Earth, and our health is paying the price. In an article by PETA updated June 14th, 2021, the average American consumption of 200 pounds of meat per person per year was linked to our doubled rates of obesity, double diabetes rate, and tripled cancer rate compared to the rest of the world. These health afflictions, many of which are chronic and irreversible, cost our constituents dearly. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in November 2019 found that vegetarians had a 15% lower total medical expenditure and a 13% lower medical outpatient expenditure compared to omnivores. When we pass this legislation, we disincentivize the consumption of factory-farmed flesh to put a greater emphasis on fruits and vegetables, which in turn promotes a healthier diet and reduces medical costs. Affirm. Now, second, If the health of our constituents doesn't sway you, let's raise the stakes and talk about our environment. This legislation proposes a major cut to meat subsidies to be directed to fruit and vegetable subsidies instead. As such, the increasing price caused by that lifted subsidy will make the demand of meat products decrease. The decreasing price of fruit and vegetables will caused by the increasing subsidies will make fruit and veggies a more commonly bought item. And even if the market just feels a little of this shift, the effect is huge. A research team from the University of Oxford recently reported that a vegan diet is the single biggest way to reduce one impact on the planet, far larger than cutting down on flights or even buying an electric car. Just by stopping eating beef, a meat that requires 28 times more land and 11 times more water than pork or chicken, you can reduce your food carbon output by a quarter. Passing this legislation and reducing the demand for meat and dairy products will reduce our nation's carbon footprint, a benefit only seen in the affirmation of this legislation, and the second reason that we pass. The third reason we pass today is to compensate for our changing climate. Meat production is an extremely water intensive. Our changing domestic landscape will soon limit our ability to produce meat entirely. The US Department of Agriculture in 2018 estimated that to produce just 1 pound of beef, it takes 1,200 gallons of water. In comparison, producing a pound of wheat takes only 25 gallons of water. Climate projections by NASA published January 9th, 2020 for expected rainfall show a 5 to 10% precipitation decrease coupled with increasing summer high temperatures in Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and many of our food-producing states. As the climate changes, our domestic consumption of meat will be slowed whether we want it to be or not. But when we pass this legislation and slowly phase out these subsidies, our constituents have time to adjust their diets to the changing landscape, preventing a sudden shift down the road. Representatives, we rarely see such a well-done piece of legislation, and failing today would be a mistake.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 6 seconds. We're now in line for 2 minutes of direct questioning. All questioners, please rise at this time. That's going to go to Representative Chandru.
Hi, Representative. So what happens to farmers when they can no longer have subsidies for dairy?
So as soon as the subsidies for dairy go down, it's going to have an increased cost of production, which will lower the consumption for our consumers.
It's going to have an increased cost of production, but what about the cost for them to sell it? If they can't have subsidies when they're producing it, isn't it going to be inherently a lot more expensive for them to produce?
Yeah, it will be more expensive for them to produce, but we want our consumers to lower the amount of dairy intake.
Because they already have very small profit margins, isn't that going to hurt them?
I'm not entirely sure.
Tyler.
Hi, Representative. What impact will this have on our low-income consumers?
For low-income consumers, it may be raising the price of meat and beef dairy products, yes, but it will be lowering that of fruit and vegetables, which is a healthier alternative and is less expensive for them. So they'll still be having their daily caloric needs met.
How will food deserts be impacted by this legislation?
Frankly, they would probably be improved since there's not enough fresh fruit and vegetables reaching inner cities in those food deserts.
Thank you, Representative.
Representative Peng. Representative Peng.
Thank you. So whenever these farms are hurt because they're no longer being subsidized, what is the first thing they're going to cut?
I'm sure you have an answer in mind.
Jobs. So whenever these meat and dairy farms lose their subsidies and start mass laying off their employees, where do those workers go?
Well, the nice part about this legislation is that it's not taking away all subsidies to agriculture. It is taking the ones specifically to meat and dairy and redistributing to the fruit and vegetables areas of the agriculture department. So those jobs will just be shifting. They're not being taken away.
Approximately how long will it take for
Representative One?
I thank the chair. Hi, Representative. Great speech. So what has happened to farms during the pandemic?
In 2019, they actually had an increase of 43% income between 2019 and 2020 because of all of the subsidies that they received. It was the fourth most productive year.
Would you agree with me that they've suffered economically during the pandemic?
No, it was the fourth most productive year in the past 50, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture 2021 analysis.
Well, so do you think that right now these farms are in any position to take the sudden cut in subsidies?
They're not suffering at all. They had the most lucrative year in the last 50.
So.
Thank you, questioner and speaker. That questioning block has elapsed. You may be virtually seated. We're now in line for a speech in the negation. All negation speakers, please rise at this time. That's going to go to Representative Nagarjuna. Feel free to correct me.
Okay, no problem. Nagarjuna. Okay, I thank the chair. Again, Representative Nagarjuna. Representative N is completely okay. I know it's a bit hard to pronounce. So I'm just going to assume everyone's ready. If not, please let me know. In Upton Sinclair's 1906 novel, The Jungle, he exposed the unethical and unsanitary horrors of the 19th century meat industry. Today, the affirmation so far has attempted to do the same, but fallen a bit short of Mr. Sinclair. Make no mistake, if Representative Sinclair was here today, even he'd recognize the leaps and bounds this industry makes for us. It's time that we return the favor. Primarily, you fail to ensure nutritional equity for low-income families. A trip to the grocery store might be a weekly occurrence for you or I, but for millions of American families, it's a privilege that they don't see too often. Due to tariffs passed under the Trump administration, U.S. farmers are permanently protected from any international competition when it comes to meat and dairy produce, which means they can raise prices as high as they want without any market competitors to keep prices in check. That might not sound too bad for you or I, because on a representative salary, we're still able to get a gallon of milk, even if it costs a couple dollars more. But for low-income families, these rapidly rising prices are economic and nutritional devastation. In an 8-year meta-analysis of pricing trends in low-income communities, specifically, Statista Newswire in February of 2021 writes that dairy prices increased to over 133% of what they were before, and meat prices tripled in less than half of that time. Paying these higher prices are a luxury that 4 million people in my home state of California simply cannot afford. Before subsidies on the meat and dairy sector were implemented, which deflated prices for consumers, 18 million American families reported to CNBC in 2010 not having day-to-day access to nutritional necessities for their infants, toddlers, and young children. However, subsidies are a literal game changer because Agriculture Economic Insights explains in 2020 that dairy product accessibility, a measure of how easy and how affordable it was for an average family to get access to dairy products, increased by 320% over the same 30-year time period that our subsidies to the industry multiplied by more than threefold. Literally a one-to-one direct relationship between our subsidies, the backbone of our industry, and poor families and their children finally getting food on the table. Representative Smith's primary concern is exacerbating climate change. First, as a representative of my constituency, seeing 4 million low-income residents in California alone lose access to basic necessities means that I take immediate action to give them what they need. Second, I'd like to frame this as an issue of equity. We all know cars are bad for the environment, and we should be working towards more sustainable automobile solutions. But I think we can all agree that just icing out all low-income families from the car market isn't a meaningful solution to the climate change issue, nor is it for low-income families getting to the grocery store. So, in Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, he postulated that the death toll of the 19th century meat industry's unsanitary practices could well be in the hundreds of thousands. The death toll of starvation in America today? The millions. Don't get lost in the weeds of this debate. The jungle of evidence points you to a negation ballot.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 4 seconds. We're now in line for 2 minutes of direct questioning. All questioners, please rise. That's going to go to Representative Mazumdar.
What does Section 4 of this bill do?
You can tell me.
It slowly phases out 10% of subsidies every year. So you say that meat prices are going to skyrocket. Won't this be a much slower thing that our consumers?
No, I didn't say they're going to skyrocket, but either way, it's like 10 years down the road when they're completely phased out, like low-income families don't exist anymore. Like it's still a long-term impact.
Okay, so you're saying in 10 years, because meat prices go up, low-income families die off?
No, like there's already millions of families starving in America, and slowly over time, meat prices keep increasing. They can't keep up with that.
Why wouldn't they just switch to healthier, cheaper alternatives which exist in the market?
Okay, milk is like literally like a necessity.
Ollie.
Hi, Representative. So when we subsidize the fruit and vegetable industry, what happens to what those products are sold for in terms of cost?
Right, their prices decrease, right?
Exactly. They increase capacity to produce, the prices go down of fruits and vegetables. What's the impact of that on the low-income families that you talked about?
They have more access to fruit and vegetables.
Exactly. Doesn't that solve for the problem you talked about them not having access to fruits and vegetables?
So because someone's poor in this country, we should keep increasing access to meat for the rich people and milk so that low-income people can just have fruits and vegetables.
Representative Lynn.
Hi, Representative. So how come food deserts exist? Like, why are there so many places where fresh produce is just not available at all?
Because we don't really subsidize the industry that much.
Yeah, exactly. Aren't you increasing food options by subsidizing that very industry?
Right, but you're not like just because like in some places you're going to increase the amount of like fruit and vegetable intake doesn't mean that's a fair solution for millions of low-income families to just get rid of their milk intake, right?
Just some industries, and like, why are
It's
we
not
getting
just some, it's over time you phase out all of milk and meat industry, like
meat and
subsidies.
dairy industry, one of the highest producing industries in America? Why are they hurt that much?
Representative
Because
Kardashian.
Representative, doesn't climate change impact lower income constituents more?
Yeah, I think it does a lot.
Okay, so doesn't this bill help to mitigate the effects of climate change on those
Yeah,
goods?
so do cars, right? But like you look to solutions to better like the production of cars. You don't not let low
There
income
are
people.
alternatives to these products in the status quo, right? So
Right,
doesn't
you
this,
don't tell a low income constituent like stop driving your car, it's bad for the environment. You fix it for them.
that's not what I'm saying, right? Because there's no alternative.
So
to
you
that
can you
car.
also can't tell a low income constituent stop eating meat, stop drinking milk, go eat fruits. That's not okay. I'm
No,
not going to
restrict them to what are in fact healthier foods, right? In the status quo.
Thank you, question speaker. That question block has the last speaker may be virtually seated. We're now in line for speech in the affirmation. All affirmation speakers, please rise at this time. That goes. Thank you. That questioning block has elapsed. Speaker may be seated. Seeing as everyone has spoken on this piece of legislation, I'm going to unilaterally move to previous question. So we will begin voting on meat subsidies. Everyone who wishes to pass this piece of legislation, raise your placard at this time. And when I call your name, you can put your placard down. Representative Karbasian, Representative Mazumdar, Representative Lynn, Representative Hassan Ali, Representative Smith, and Representative Rodriguez. I count 6. Everyone wishing to vote on the negation of this piece of legislation, please raise your placard at this time and put it down when I call on you. Representative N, Representative Guan, Representative Chandru, Representative Tyler, Representative Pang. There should be 1 abstention. All who wish to abstain. Oh, wait, no, me. Okay, so on a vote of 6 to 5, this legislation does pass. My congratulations to the sponsor, Representative Chandru. Is that a motion?
Motion to 10-minute recess, seeing a natural break in debate.
Any seconds? Do I see any objections? Okay, seeing none, we will move to a 10-minute recess. I ask that you be back by 4:08.